Making an episode of a live-action show is a lot like baking a pie. To make a good one requires equal parts hard work, time, and love. If you succeed, you'll create something great to be enjoyed by everyone. But if you are missing even one of the key ingredients,
you will fail, and it will burn,
leaving a lingering scent. My name is PIEGUYRULZ, and I'm here at the bottom of the bakery to smell that pie. Metaphorically speaking, of course. In reality, I'm here to talk to you guys about an episode of a Schneider's Bakery show that was really not good. Hey guys, PIEGUYRULZ here, and welcome back to the bottom of the bakery. Let's just jump right into the episode today, instead of giving any sort of preliminary facts. And don't think that I'm trying to obscure anything from you here. Oh no, I would never mislead you. I just don't want to waste any time, like this episode wasted mine. The episode is like a cake. Nothing special, nothing fancy, just a plain old cake. So this episode is about Carly, you guessed it, dating a bad boy. It starts out with this kid stealing Spencer's motorcycle, and then Spencer deciding not to press charges and instead taking the kid under his wing as some sort of protege because Spencer always wanted to be a bad kid when he was growing up. Carly adamantly and vocally hates this kid, even though honestly he doesn't do anything worse than what Sam does on a daily basis, and she's Carly's best friend. Spencer leaves Carly and this kid alone, and surprise of all surprises, he catches them making out when he comes back home. Spencer's furious because he stupidly doesn't understand what teenagers with hormones being put in a house alone together will do, and grounds Carly for kissing him. Even though he was mad at her for not liking him, and now he's mad at her for explicitly liking him. Can I just point out that between this and the Pear Store episode, Spencer is terrible about leaving Carly home alone with boys. Oh, and there's also a subplot going on about Sam scamming Freddie into making her a website, but like a lot of subplots on this show, there really isn't much to it at all, and it just feels like it's there to fill time. Anyway, Griffin meets Carly at school because he's not allowed at her house anymore, and they make out some more. Spencer catches them because he's disguised as a janitor at the school, and then this other janitor comes and starts fighting him. Really, nothing is accomplished in this scene. Spencer tells Carly that no matter how old she is, he's always going to be overprotective of his little sister. Which kind of leads me scratching my head. Is the issue here that Carly is dating, or is the issue here that Carly is dating a kid who steals motorcycles and skips school? Because while Spencer may not have that much ground to stand on when it comes to not letting his sister date boys at almost 15, he definitely has a right to say, yeah, you're not dating this kid who's a delinquent. But of course, that's not the argument he goes for. Carly and Griffin plan this confrontation with Spencer where they pretend to fight and hate each other, and then Carly tricks Spencer into leaving her home alone, where of course she meets up with Griffin. But when they both get back to Carly's room, Spencer is there. Dun dun dun. And what does he do after catching them trying to manipulate him? Well, he lets them have a nice night alone, because suddenly now they have his approval. What, did they earn his respect by tricking him? I don't understand it. This is what happens with these stupid shows, is that these characters don't have motivations for what they do. It's just, oh, well, I guess the episode's over, so the conflict just has to end. Do we get a scene of Spencer changing his mind? Do we get a scene of Spencer thinking it over? Do we get any sort of change between I hate Griffin and you should not date Griffin directly to, I'll leave you kids alone. You seem like a nice couple now. Nope, there's no transition. There's nothing. A character just randomly changes his mind without any sort of fanfare made about it. You know what another big problem with this episode is? Griffin. His character is not fleshed out in any way. I do not know a thing about this guy. And one of the reasons for that is that we don't actually see him and Carly fall for each other. All we do is see Spencer walk in on them and then hear Carly talk about how sweet he is. We don't actually get to see firsthand how nice he is to her. Whenever we see them together, he's just kind of there. Heck, most of his bad boy-isms are informed anyway. All we know is that he skipped school and stole a motorcycle. We hear how much of a bad boy he is, but there's no other examples from that. Is he a bad boy or is he a good kid? If he's a bad boy, then Carly definitely shouldn't be dating him, and nothing that he did should have changed Spencer's mind. If he's a good but misunderstood kid, well, this plot makes a little more sense, but you have to actually, show that. But on the upside, this episode did have a few moments that almost made me laugh. Some of Spencer's lines are pretty decent, like when he says, "I may be an idiot, but I'm not stupid." The word besmooched also gets thrown around, and that's mildly amusing. There's not any really good comedy in here, but I mean, I have to give the episode credit where it deserves it, and it gets a little bit of credit, and because the rest of the episode doesn't have that many holes in it, I consider it at least one step above most of the material we cover here on Bottom of the Bakery. So why am I talking about it on here, you might ask? Well, let's check on the cake and see how they did. It doesn't look that bad. It still looks a little burnt, but hey, at least this time it looks edible. That's a step above most of the rest of the stuff on here. Wait a second. What are they? No, you can't just put another cake on top of it. That's not how layered cake works. You don't cook one cake and then throw another cake on top of it and keep cooking it. I don't think the timing will work out on this. As some of you may know, this is actually a double-length episode. Why did I hide that from you? Because the second half of this episode has almost nothing to do with the first half. So much so that I was convinced that these were two separate episodes that Nickelodeon had mashed together just for ratings or something. But as far as I can tell online, that wasn't the case. This is just a really poorly planned out special, and the only thing between them is one character who acts completely different in both halves. And while the first episode wasn't anything near good, it's definitely the second half of this episode that drives the entire thing just way down into the pits of the bakery. That whole problem about not really knowing too much about Griffin's character becomes way more of an issue in the second half. Also, the ending of the episode makes the first half of it look entirely pointless. So this half of the episode starts out with Griffin getting in a motorcycle accident. So Griffin takes off his shirt to show his injury, and Carly starts touching his shirtless body, and I'm feeling really uncomfortable watching this. In case you're wondering, Carly said she was 14 in the first half of this. At least Freddy comes in and is disgusted with the situation as I am. So Carly goes up to do the web show. By the way, remember that this show is about a web show? There was a webcast in the beginning of the first episode, but it had literally nothing to do with anything. I feel like the worst episodes of the show are when they stray away from the web show aspect. Anyway, Carly and Sam discuss how hot this guy is, and Carly pretty much states the only reason she's interested in him is because him being a bad boy and having scars and such makes him very attractive. Because that doesn't make the main character look really shallow and pathetic. But oh, you wait, it gets worse. After the webcast, we get part of the B story, which is about Spencer showing off his shampoo. It's a parody of, well, should be obvious. And something about Sam having a recurring dream. So Carly's over at Griffin's house, and apparently Griffin's parents are as stupid as Spencer is, as she lets them go into his room alone. His room is, of course, unequivocally awesome and cool, with hubcaps on the walls, and all sorts of other cool knickknacks like bowling pins. You gotta really give it up to the set decorators on these shows. They know how to make some really awesome looking rooms. So they start making out for like the fourth time this episode, and then it happens. Carly sees, on the wall, a bunch of stuffed animals in plastic containers. Cue laugh track. Carly questions him on these, including saying things like, "Yeah, I had those when I was younger," and, "Oh, whose are those?" Then giving him a stupid look when he says they're his. When he talks about them, he seems really enthused, like he actually cares about them. And for the first time in this double-length episode, he seems like an actual human being, other than generic bad boy stereotype. Carly acts utterly horrified by this information, and the laugh track keeps on going. Carly also says, "Well, I guess you've had these ever since you were a little girl. Boy." And look, he is acting a little dorky when it comes to these things. He gives them voices, but it's not like he's acting crazily overboard. He's honestly acting in such a way that I would assume a teenage girl would probably find pretty cute. But of course, Carly's mugging and making faces that looks like she was shot in the stomach, as if him owning these Pee-wee babies is just an utter betrayal of his character. And the way she acts all throughout this scene is just really obnoxious. Carly, if you don't like these things, tell him you're not interested in them. Tell him you want to talk about something else. Don't sit there and make faces like a child. Carly, of course, goes and tells Sam that he collects Pee-wee babies, and she freaks out in such a crazily over-exaggerated way. You would think that she walked in on him in a diaper pooping himself, based upon her reaction. And that's the rest of this episode. Carly, Freddy, and and Sam making fun of this guy for collecting stuffed animals. Because apparently the three of them are so freaking normal that they don't do anything that might be unusual or considered childish or weird. It's not like they have a web show where they do incredibly strange stuff on a daily basis. This one guy's Pee-wee Baby collection is enough to just make him seem like an entire freak of nature compared to you. The entire show just has decided that someone collecting Beanie Babies at the age of however old Griffin is just a sin against nature and something that deserves to be ridiculed for 10 minutes straight. So Carly goes back over to Griffin's house, and she finds him in the middle of bidding for a new Pee-wee Baby. Might I add, by the way, that Griffin, in the first half of this episode, never even showed any slight hint of being into Pee-wee Babies. He is hugely into them, and he is not ashamed of it in the second half, so you think that this maybe would have came up, at least in passing in the first half, but nope. First half, we get zero mention, zero foreshadowing, zero hints. Second half of the episode, you don't get a word out of his mouth that isn't about Pee-wee Babies. It's almost as if Griffin was planned to be two different characters in two different episodes. So Carly buys Griffin a power drill because, I don't know, maybe that would get him off of his interest in Pee-wee Babies. I don't think you understand how interests work, Carly. Carly and Sam talk about what Carly is gonna do about the situation, and Carly thinks about dumping him, but she says she doesn't want to be a terrible person, because that ship totally hasn't sailed. They start making fun of Griffin some more, and Griffin just conveniently walks in. Griffin calls her out on it, and Carly was like, oh, well, I just kind of expected you were a different guy that didn't collect Pee-wee Babies. And Griffin rightfully says, if you can't accept my hobby, maybe we should break up. Carly says nothing, and then the show decided to give us a shot of Griffin's head just standing there. In post-production, they put an effect where they put Pee-wee Babies floating around his head in high-pitched voices going, wee, wee. I think the implication is Carly is hallucinating this, in which case, yeah, I think you're a little bit weirder than the guy who's collecting Pee-wee Babies, Carly. So she says absolutely nothing, and Griffin breaks it off with her. And then she starts smiling, and her and Sam cheer because Carly doesn't have to date Griffin anymore. That's right, she doesn't feel bad at all for making fun of this guy and making him feel bad for his hobby. No remorse, no regrets, none of that. She's just happy that she didn't have to break it off with him. And Griffin's completely valid point about how she shouldn't be dating him if she doesn't like his main hobby, completely ignored. This wasn't the lesson of the episode. It was just the thing that the guy who is now considered the antagonist of the episode said to Carly. Like, if that was the lesson that she was supposed to learn, if she had regrets or something like that, this episode could have been salvageable. It's not a problem that she was shallow as long as that's what the episode was about, and it was about her realizing that she shouldn't be this shallow. But nope, that's not it at all. It's not even about how Carly maybe should have learned something about this guy before jumping into a relationship with him. No, there is no lesson. The character doesn't learn squat, and outside of Griffin, no one calls her on this. You really gotta love how this is an episode about Carly liking a guy because he steals motorcycles and then dumping him because he collects Pee-wee Babies. And if that was supposed to be the big ironic joke of the episode, they did not do a good job in portraying that. This feels entirely straight, not like it's supposed to be any sort of parody of anything. Is it weird for someone his age to be collecting stuffed animals? You know what? Yeah, it is, a little bit. But that doesn't mean that it's bad or wrong or horrible. Everyone does weird things. Apparently, according to this episode, anyone who collects them is nothing but a little girl. Which is just great writing when your audience is children. Way to make an episode explicitly telling children that collecting something that is common for them to collect is some sort of weird, wrong thing. This isn't a show like Seinfeld where you know the characters are terrible people. This is a show where she's always portrayed as this innocent, amazing, perfect girl. But in this episode, she didn't even have the common decency to break up with the guy. She had to make him look like the bad guy, like he was leaving her. She couldn't even have done that. This entire episode is just one gigantic mess. And speaking of which, let's see how that cake's doing. Yeah, that looks rather burnt. Wow, they decorated it fast, though. Actually, now it doesn't look half bad. Maybe I should try a bite. Wait a minute. I'm not as shallow as Carly is. That cake is probably still disgusting under all this frosting. Let's just wipe a little bit away, shall we? Oh, yeah. Exactly as I thought. Alright, let's close this thing out with some leftovers. So there is a radio in this episode that is yellow with lime green circular dials, and next to it there's a pink purse with a pink star on it. So either I'm crazy or this show intentionally put in a little very subtle SpongeBob reference. During the webcast, they have raisins rain down on them because apparently they own a machine that allows that to happen. How high-tech is the iCarly studio anyway? PIEGUYRULZ, out.